Alex said, I'm Steve Rader. I have worked at NASA's Johnson Space Center for about 31 years. And for the last 7, I've actually been working in our Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation, which actually works across the whole agency and across the government to kind of get open innovation infused into the life and work that we're doing. And so about a year ago, I started getting a lot of requests to talk and non-NASA related. And so I spun off a side gig. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the side gig because that's actually part of the story at this point. So as you guys know, things are changing, and things aren't changing just a little bit. Things are changing at a faster and faster rate. And in fact, what we're seeing is now that the rate of change is starting to break traditional business models in real and significant ways. And so taking a step back, if you look at just all of the scientists that are behind all of this technology and change that we've built over really hundreds and even thousands of years, that set of scientists and that of technology is really astounding. But what most people don't realize in this engine of change that we've got is how much we're at a new place. We're at a stage now where 90% of the scientists that are alive today, or I'm sorry, 90% of the scientists that have ever lived are alive today, and doing stuff with all of that technology that was built before us, and it's having pretty astounding effects. You can see it in the patent applications, where just a few years ago we were a couple of 100,000 a year, and now we're over 3.5, 4 million a year. If you look at PhDs coming online, they're just skyrocketing. India and China have come online. Their educational institutions in a lot of developing countries around the world have now put universities in place, and they're graduating engineers and scientists, and they're starting to do research. And part of this too is that as we build technology, we've built these building blocks that are really starting to power things. We think a lot about the computer as this kind of basic building block that now is turned into a personal computer, and now it's generated cell phones and all sorts of neat devices. But it's actually gone even farther, right? We have all of these inexpensive, accessible tools like autonomous vehicles and machine learning and cheap sensors and blockchain and software APIs and additive manufacturing. And the list just goes on. And these are now technologies that are accessible to a large number of people, but more importantly, they apply to every industry. They're not just applying to 1 or 2 industries. And so their development is just skyrocketing because there's development efforts going on across every industry. And you can really see it if you look at just a few examples, right? Additive manufacturing, that's 3D printing, right? 3D printing is now being used to generate rocket motors in ways that we never could before. It's changing the way we build homes and buildings. It's being used for jet engines. GE has a whole additive program now where they're redesigning their entire jet engine line to be 3D printed at a fraction of the cost, something like $6 billion a year change in savings. You can actually 3D print fabric and clothing, which is just kind of mind-blowing. Doctors are 3D printing organs, which is just phenomenal. And even in food, there's a whole string of restaurants around the world now that feature 3D printed food as their piece. It's just these technologies go across everybody. And so you guys are seeing this with blockchain as another example, right? Where banks are starting to use blockchain more. The food supply is very much traced with blockchain. Education's got blockchain being looked at for their certifications, real estate for actual transaction tracking, government, and even healthcare. So I could show chart after chart of these kinds of things. But what the results are is that both we have the advantage of these amazing new technologies that are causing us to have significant chain gains, but it's also, in addition to solving problems, if you're on the industry side, it's really hard to find these technologies and these solutions that can help you, because the explosion is so large and so worldwide that you just can't Google the latest and greatest tech, right? And so the biggest pieces of this and the biggest pieces of these building blocks are, of course, AI and automation, right? That is what's really on steroids and starting to transform companies. And a great example in the fintech world, and you guys probably all know about this, is Ant Financial in China. This is actually coming from a book that Karim Lakhani put together called Competing in the Age of AI. And he kind of lays out this case where Ant Financial has put together a digital platform built on top of AI with connectivity and really digital at its base. And they are now providing scalable financial services to people who just a few years ago didn't even have a bank account, all across China. And they're using it in really interesting ways, right? So they have say 2,000 to 3,000 different machine learning algorithms calculating everyone's credit score. And they're doing that in such a way that they have this thing called 312 or 310. 3 minutes to apply for a loan, 1 second to approve or deny that loan, and 0 people involved. And that has already scaled to something pretty unimaginable. And it includes this kind of idea of an AI factory, this creating AI, but then improving it with more and more data, which is really interesting. I'm not going to get into the nerdiness of this, but what's fascinating about this, in the book, they talk a little bit about how you have a car factory in the real world and a shoe factory and maybe some other tooling factory, and each one of those is very different. But AI factories are all the same, and this model is starting to replicate out in different industries and being applied in some really amazing ways. And you really don't have to look farther than Amazon, right? Where they've actually taken not only the AI piece, but the robotics piece, and they've put that together into this powerful package that is putting everyone out of business, right? They have a way that they can actually model the predictives of all of their suppliers. They have a really low friction way to do shipping. They have machine learning really helping consumers find and buy their favorite products based on their data that they gather through their platforms, right, and their habits. And all of these are coming together in ways that fundamentally provide a low friction experience, right? So basically a customer wants something and it takes just a couple clicks to get it. Amazon has this thing, you've probably seen it, called the dash button, which is literally you stick it to your washing machine. And when you're ready for detergent, you push that button. And when you push that button, the next day, or in some cities in an hour, you get detergent delivered. That is low friction consumer exchange. And that's what we're seeing over and over in platforms, is they're providing this kind of low friction exchange and transaction in ways that you just can't compete in traditional methods. So if we're looking at these rates of change, the technology and associated knowledge is increasing in such a way that it's really difficult for organizations to innovate and keep up with the tech advances. And on top of that, they're having a hard time finding the skills and resources to actually do that innovation and keep up with it. So it's kind of a two-sided piece. And we're seeing this, if you look out at Amazon's, they've got a report out there on how their workforce is upskilling. And you see this in these charts. Now, what they're showing here, and I'll zoom in a little bit, is every 3 years they're showing how each of their jobs has changed. And what you notice is their largest jobs that they have staffing now didn't even exist 5 to 10 years ago. And that is pretty astounding. That means new skills are generating new jobs, but that transition's really, really tough. And that's effectively the significant change that's going on in business, is businesses are having to somehow adjust to all of this really big change. And what's happening? Well, they're not adjusting, right? If you look at the last 15 years, our most successful companies, those that made it onto the Fortune 500, over half have gone. Over half are gone away, right? Look at the how long a company lasts. In the early 30s, it was almost 100 years. Now, 2018, it's less than 20. The average age or lifespan of a company. So what has to happen? Because right now, organizations are increasingly at risk of remaining competitive and relevant. And so there is really this mandate that organizations have to